Namaste and welcome to another edition of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. If you're joining us for the first time, we publish episodes on politics, policy and culture every week focused on India. So do follow or subscribe to us to stay updated on all of this awesome content. If you're a returning visitor and you like our content, do consider rating us and reviewing us on your favorite platform so more people can discover us. Well, with that out of the way, the weekly is where we discuss the news and events of the week that was. And it's been a pretty eventful week, I should say. We had election results in Himachal Pradesh and Gujarat, and of course, municipal elections in Delhi, which were, of course, highlighted big time across TV channels and whatnot. Then we had the ISRO test hypersonic vehicles, which was an interesting development. And in more popcorn stuff, Twitter Files 2.0 and 3.0 came out last week with Barry Weiss and Matt Taibbi releasing a few other files and secrets. In some economic news, Apple plans to move out of China, and TSMC is due to invest $40 billion in an Arizona plant for chips. And in international news, Russia and US have swapped prisoners last week, and we'll talk to you about some of the significance of these things. Alright, let's get started with the first piece of news for this week, which is the election results in Himachal, Gujarat, and of course the municipal elections in Delhi. Over the week, the results of two General Assembly elections and a municipal election in Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh, and Delhi were announced. In Gujarat, the BJP registered a historic win by winning 156 seats in the 182-member assembly. AAP managed to get a foothold in the state, making it a national party. Himachal Pradesh maintained its tradition of not voting an incumbent to power and gave Congress a win with 40 seats in the 68-member assembly. And in Delhi's municipal corporation election, the AAP ousted BJP by winning 134 seats in a house of 250, putting it just above the majority. Abhishek, interesting results. Of course, BJP coming back in full swing in Gujarat for the 7th time, which is an incredible feat. And, Himachal maintaining its tradition of voting out the incumbent. So what do you make of these results?
Yeah, in some ways, this was quite interesting that all the three major parties won each of the elections, but obviously very different implications or reasons behind each of them, and we can't really generalize anything. So let's start with the biggest one of them, that is Gujarat, right? And I think all of us were pretty certain that the BJP was definitely coming back to power here. So the questions were basically what would be like the margins and what impact would the Aam Aadmi Party have, right? Which was sort of making a big push to get itself started in Gujarat. And so, as you said, the results were very emphatic in favor of the BJP, right? It increased its vote share from about 49% to 52.5%. But even more dramatically, you will recall last election was very close, right? It had sort of won a hard-fought victory and had only 99 seats last time. So to go from 99 to 156 is a very spectacular performance. I think the Congress was the big loser in this election in Gujarat, right? They went from 77 seats down to 17. I think they are below even the threshold to get an opposition party leader, right, in the assembly. And so if you see the Congress party's, recent developments, they have been totally focused on two things. One is their party election, right, which, whatever you call it, election or selection, which Mr. Kharge won, right, against Mr. Tharoor. So that was one thing that was taking up a lot of bandwidth. The other is this Bharat Jodo Yatra that Rahul Gandhi has been on in the last few months, right, and which is still ongoing. And so essentially they kind of ignored, the bigwigs of Congress basically ignored the Gujarat election. I guess they were probably sure that they were not winning it, or they had any chance rather, I would say. And Aam Aadmi Party, which has got only 5 seats, but importantly, made a big dent in the Congress vote bank. So basically they got 13% of the votes. Congress fell from 41 to 27, right, which is about a 14% drop. So essentially they took about 1/3 of the votes of the Congress party. And so this is going to be a worrying trend for the Congress gradually over the next few years, right? As and when Aam Aadmi Party decides to sort of expand its footprint and enter new states. It has done it very successfully in Punjab, as we saw, right? So much so that it went on to win the election. But it will also attempt to do it in, I would say, various states. Maybe they'll target states which have significant urban populations to try and make that dent. And so that is something to be seen. But yeah, that's the story for this Gujarat election. Essentially, I would say, looking at the bigger picture, the Narendra Modi magic works very clearly in two pieces, right? One is in Lok Sabha election across states, and then in assembly elections, it very certainly works in Gujarat, and to some extent, I would say in Uttar Pradesh, right, where from he now represents Uttar Pradesh in the Lok Sabha. So I would say Gujarat and Uttar Pradesh are two places where the Modi magic really works in the assembly elections, and of course, it still works very strong in Lok Sabha elections. Now, coming to Himachal Pradesh, as you said, the trend was maintained of every 5 years, right? The winning party changes there between Congress and BJP. Although the exit polls were sort of giving a very, very contested picture, and if you look at the vote share, it's almost identical between the two parties. Congress got about 43.9, BJP got 43%, but in terms of seat, there's a big change, right? So Congress 40, BJP 25. And so I guess the Congress had a better sort of conversion to seats, right, when it comes to winning the seats. I think there were a lot of local factors at play in Himachal Pradesh. Number one, the BJP kind of failed to manage inter-party local issues, which resulted in a lot of rebel candidates contesting. So I believe the BJP had as many as 19 rebels contesting. I think 2 or 3 of them managed to win, but they possibly even sort of managed to dent the chances of BJP in few seats. That was one. The BJP incumbent government was facing some challenges in terms of dealing with protests from apple farmers, right? That's an issue we understand that the government did not really manage to contain very well. Then there was this Congress platform, let's say, whole promise of bringing back the OPS, which is the old pension scheme. I would say that's a very disastrous policy that the Congress is talking about, right? Because Himachal Pradesh is already one of those states which has a massive fiscal burden in terms of pensions, right? And I think fundamentally a few years back, all of us had sort of come to this understanding that going forward, everything will be defined benefit schemes, right? Where employees and employers both contribute towards retirement benefits. But going back to the old pension schemes where the entire burden is on the government or the employer, here it's the state government, is going to be a massive fiscal challenge. And if the Congress takes this victory in Haryana as sort of an endorsement of that policy, I think things could get very tricky, right? I don't know if they will sort of start using that as a promise in various future elections in the next years or not. But I would say that's a worrying development. From the BJP's point of view, I guess a bit of a question mark is being raised on the party president JP Nadda ji, right, who hails from Himachal Pradesh. And so for him to not to be able to win his home state sort of matters. If you drill down locally, and maybe we could do that in future episodes, you would see that a lot of BJP lost a lot of ground in places like Kangra and Shimla. And so it's basically a lot of local issues getting bubbled up. I guess, as I was saying, when Narendra Modi is not on the ticket, basically, right, opposition parties are actually going to be competitive and could even win, right? We've seen that in various elections since 2018, I would say, right? So I guess this was one more of that in that trend. But overall, I would not read too much into this other than I guess there's some introspection for the BJP to be done in terms of how strong do you want your local leadership to be. I think apart from Yogi Adityanath and I would say Himanta Biswa Sarma in Assam, right, the BJP CMs seem to be not very, let's say, mass leaders anymore. And they are totally reliant on organization strength and the name of Prime Minister Modi to win elections. And where the organization itself is sort of pulling in different directions, then it becomes a challenge, right? And so for the Congress, I would say, they managed to win without much involvement from the Gandhis. Maybe that's a good sign that, Rahul Gandhi didn't campaign. And so that was a good sign for Congress voters, right? Coming to the last one, not much comments on the Delhi MCD from my side. I would say that this was kind of expected with the divided sort of polity that we have in administrative polity that we have in Delhi, right? With the center, state government, or let's say the pseudo state government, and then the municipal corporation pulling in different directions. I guess it was kind of sensible for the voters to give Aam Aadmi Party, which definitely is very dominant in the state, the legislative assembly, right, to give them the MCD as well. And so they managed to, significantly increase their vote share from I believe 26% to 42% in this election. The BJP was kind of stagnant, and so there was a lot of vote switching once again from the Congress to the Aam Aadmi Party that happened in Delhi. I think the next steps there are there will be some direct mayoral election which will be conducted soon. But yeah, I think the AAP continues to remain sort of dominant or become more and more dominant in Delhi. And the Delhi elections, sort of, if you leave aside the Lok Sabha, right, where the BJP continues to do very well, in the other elections, there's a very distinct sort of class divide that you can see, right, with people from the more poorer classes backing the Aam Aadmi Party. And this is probably where their freebie politics or promises of freebies probably resonates the highest. And so Delhi, with its large migrant population, and also, the poorer sections probably get attracted towards the policies of the AAP much more than the BJP. Also, I would say, I guess Arvind Kejriwal's personal popularity also matters, right? And when he is, and essentially in the state election or the MCD, it is his face, right? Rather than, Narendra Modi's face, because he is not relevant for a municipality election. Even though the BJP tries to run every election with the face of Narendra Modi. So yeah, I think these would be my takeaways from this election cycle.
Abhishek, a quick follow-up. I know we'll do an election recap with Rohit Jaramam if possible, but, does this signify AAP truly becoming a national party and, Arvind Kejriwal becoming a national leader per se?
So I don't know if we are yet at the point where we can say that the AAP has truly become a national party. I mean, technically they have become, but then the likes of CPM are also called technically national party in the election commission definitions. I think what we can say is that Arvind Kejriwal definitely has the ambition to be a national leader. He is definitely looking to fill up the opposition space to the BJP as much as possible. And with the inner churnings within the Congress party, their lack of focus in some ways to electoral politics right now definitely gives space for the Aam Aadmi Party to grow. And I think what they will do is tactically choose states essentially where they see that there is a space for the opposition party. There are no strong regional parties that are anyway filling up particular states, right? Because it doesn't make sense for the AAP perhaps to venture too much into, let's say, Bengal or Odisha or Tamil Nadu, where there are, very strong regional players. But it might make more sense for them to spread out through North India, through Central India, where there is a direct clash between the BJP and Congress usually. And if the Congress is seen to be, getting a little weak, the AAP can sort of slowly fill out that space.
All right. As I said, we'll probably do an election recap with Rohit Jaraman, our political expert. Moving on, the ISRO successfully completed a hypersonic vehicle test run and it met all its targets. On Friday, the ISRO announced that the joint test run of hypersonic vehicles with headquarters of the Integrated Defense Staff, HQIDS, was successful. The ISRO's official Twitter handle read, ISRO and JSIIC have jointly conducted hypersonic vehicle trials. The trials achieved all required parameters and demonstrated hypersonic vehicle capability. A hypersonic vehicle can be an aeroplane, missile, or spacecraft that has the ability to travel 5 times faster than the speed of sound or greater than Mach 5. Nirav, this is an interesting development, and we've seen ISRO in the news quite often this year, right? Fantastic stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So one is, I think there's been a lot of push on trying to utilize our own capabilities and our indigenous capabilities. So basically what this hypersonic missile does, it is a missile which can launch like an explosive, which could be nuclear or non-nuclear, and traveling at 5 times the speed of light, it's too fast to be detected by radar easily. So it can slip through missile defense systems, and it is also, it can maneuver mid-flight as well. So this is like another arrow in our own quiver, right? So we have one more weapon over there, which is a good deterrent. So absolutely. Second thing is just the positive externalities of all of these things, and these things coming out in the media, right, is good for our own science and technology development. I think more components, if they are sourced indigenously, and more things which are done indigenously, leads to better private sector capabilities as well. Also in the news was we also constructed a trisonic wind tunnel. So this is to aid the aerodynamic design of rockets and re-entry of spacecraft, right? This is at the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center. So I think all these news which are coming out I think it's quite positive. It's nice that, in some place at least the taxpayer money is being utilized for something positive, right? And this also leads to us not having to import these missiles from elsewhere. See, we are already too dependent on Russia, and as you see that some external event somewhere else can actually lead to our own defense capabilities being blocked by, say, Russia getting sanctions, etc. So we need not just to save our, like, say, foreign exchange, but also for resilience and own reliability. I think now India is big enough, rich enough that India has to depend on itself and not just import all weapons. So that's another positive thing. So all in all, it's like a very positive news, and this is as probably, as I said, all these are like small steps. We are going towards a journey, and now India being like the fifth largest economy, we shouldn't be importing arms from others. We shouldn't be importing arms from France or Russia, which actually in economies term, maybe per capita is different, or maybe in science and technology is different. But per capita, they're smaller GDP than India, right? Overall, gross GDP, right? Per capita, they're higher. So we should not be relying on smaller countries for our defense capabilities. We have to develop it on our own. And all these are small steps taken towards it. And hopefully there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, apparently the Indian scientists are also working on a project for an indigenous dual-capable hypersonic cruise missile as part of their hypersonic technology demonstrator vehicle program as well. Yeah, I mean, we've been thinking about an episode where we deep dive with someone on the policy and the tech aspects of ISRO, right? And hopefully we'll have a scientist or an ex-scientist on the podcast to discuss some of these developments. I think it's certainly very, very encouraging. And the other aspect is the collaboration of ISRO with some of these startups, right? Whether it's Skyroot, Agnikul, Pixel, all of them have shown amazing progress over the year. So yeah, and fantastic. And just a reminder that ISRO operates at perhaps 1/10 the budget that NASA has. So yeah, moving on. Twitter Files 2.0 and 3.0 are out. On Friday, Barry Weiss, the founder and editor of the Free Press, published a second thread of the Twitter Files. The thread was about secretive blacklists and shadow banning practices by the previous head of trust and safety. On Saturday, Matt Taibbi published the third installment of the Twitter Files on deplatforming the president. This thread recounts the suppression tactics used on the account of the then President Donald Trump in the days leading up to the deplatforming in Jan 2020. Well, yesterday I recorded an extensive chat on this with Ashish Chandorkar and Amit Paranjpe, guests on the podcast multiple times here. And we spoke about all of this stuff, censoring, deplatforming, content moderation, and so on and so forth. So you will get a comprehensive overview of all that's happening with respect to Twitter. But yeah, very quickly, I think on the second Twitter Files, one of the things that was intriguing is this whole visibility filtering thing, right? Which is just a nice way of saying censoring, right? And well, a lot of us just suspected all of this was true. We just got confirmation for all of this stuff, right? Which is that, hey, some accounts could arbitrarily be shadow banned and whatnot. Now, Elon himself has come out and said that there is freedom of speech but not freedom of reach, and that there could be restrictions on the amplification of tweets and whatnot, right? But he has also come out and said that, they will call this out, right? And you can actually appeal for shadow banning per se, right? So it won't necessarily be shadow banning in that sense, right? But yeah, interesting stuff. Abhishek, what do you think about the third installment?
Yeah, before I go to the third installment, I'd like to read out a screenshot in the second installment, right, shared by Barry Weiss. And this is a message by Yoel Roth, who was the previous Twitter, head of safety or whatever they call it, right? So he says in this message, one of the biggest areas I would love research support on is regarding non-removal policy interventions like disabling engagements and de-amplification visibility filtering. The hypothesis underlying much of what we have implemented is that if exposure to, example, misinformation directly causes harm, we should use remediations that reduce exposure and limiting the spread virality of content, and so on. So basically what they're saying is, so their time and effort was being spent a lot on how to control information by bad actors, as they deem it, right? And essentially they deem everyone pretty much right of center as bad actors, right? And so I found actually Twitter 2.0, the 2.0 files being much more interesting, right? The kind of people whose names were there is a very sort of diverse group of people. On one hand, you had Dr. Bhattacharya, right, who is a researcher from Stanford, who was basically saying that, vaccines for children might not be a good idea, right? But at that time, everyone was of the opinion, everyone of the establishment had decided that vaccines, anyone raising skepticism about vaccines have to be sort of pushed back, right? Their spread of message has to be contained. On the other hand, you have the very viral anonymous account Libs of TikTok, and if you see the kind of messages that were shared justifying it, they could not really pinpoint one single tweet or one thread which they would say is one which is violating policy. And so the sort of argumentation that is going on is like the general direction of tweets that this person makes is harmful to a group of people, like let's say LGBTQ people and so on, right? And so a lot of what is going on is invention of reasons to justify their actions, right? I mean, it's like you are dictators, but you want to feel good about yourself, right? And so there are extensive debates going on as to what's the best way to ban people or, shadow ban people. Yeah, Rosh.
So the interesting thing about Libs of TikTok rather, was they just repost content.
Yes.
Right. I mean,
not even edit. They just
not even edit or quote or anything like that. Right. I mean, they just repost content, and so I mean, I don't know. It's very weird, right? So if they're reposting content and that content is somehow not kosher, then how is the original content allowed then?
So it's like, what Libs of TikTok would do is take, let's say, very weird or crazy sounding rants by liberals or progressives or woke people, right? And so, and to the normal person, the lay person, right, that sounds hysterical, right? That these crazy people are talking really crazy things. But what people like Roth or Vijaya Gadde will say is that, you are not giving the full context, or that post, the original post was for a certain audience, right? And now you are sharing it with a wider audience, which makes us look very bad. Basically, that is what is happening, right? And so, yeah, I think that was 2.0. I think one of the things of interest for us is, how much of shadow banning was happening in India, right? I don't know if Matt Taibbi or, Barry Weiss will get down to global implications. I guess they are a lot more focused with US domestic stuff right now. And that is.
But Elon has said yes, right? I mean, Elon has said that global leaders have been suppressed.
Yes, I mean, he said that in a reply to someone asking him. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how much of that was happening in India. Coming to 3.0, I think this is basically talking about what went behind the scenes in the lead up to the decision to ban Donald Trump from Twitter. And it sort of gives a detailed account of various communications happening within Twitter. I mean, look, the Republican Party and sections of that were going after two things, right? One was the validity of votes cast through postal ballots and other sort of newer methods, right? Like the non-traditional ways of voting. And that is a big policy sort of contention or issue in the United States, right? The Democrats have been pushing things like early voting, having people have the liberty of voting 30 days before elections and so on. And of course, US election rules are very diverse, right? It's all at state levels. So that was a big sort of flashpoint, and the Republicans were trying their best to push back against that. But I think that was seen as anti-democratic, right, by liberals and the Twitter management. And the other was, of course, election result denialism, right, which is basically saying that we will not accept the results of elections by certified officials. And so it's kind of hard to say that what Twitter did here was wrong, apart from the fact that they were not playing fair here, right? Now, or neutral. Now, they would say that neutrality in a fundamental question like democracy itself, right, or democratic results itself is not optional, right? And they would say that the sanctity of democracy in the United States itself was at stake. And in some ways, I would say the January 6th spectacle, right? And while I personally feel that it was nothing like a coup, it was like some crazy people who went overboard in their enthusiasm and sort of broke into the Congress. But there was no grand design behind that whole event, right? It was like a bunch of people who were sort of over enthusiastic, or they just went overboard on a particular occasion. But the spectacle of that has been made to come across such that it's a massive insurrection that has taken place. And I guess in some sense, in the public opinion court, the Democratic side won, right, that debate, right, because it made the Republicans and President Trump look very bad and anti-democratic for not accepting the results of elections, even possibly threatening the life of the then Vice President Mike Pence, and so on.
Yeah, it is. And indeed, there's plenty more that we can discuss, but we won't belabor the point. Do check out that fascinating discussion I had with Ashish and Amit on the podcast. We'll publish it next week. In other news, Apple plans to move out of China. In recent weeks, Apple has accelerated its plans to shift production out of China. The tech giant has reportedly asked its suppliers to plan more actively assembling Apple products elsewhere in Asia, particularly India and Vietnam. And in other related news, the TSMC is due to invest $40 billion in an Arizona plant for chips. On Tuesday, the US President Joe Biden and the founder of TSMC announced the company's second chip plant in Arizona, more than tripling the company's investment from $12 billion to $40 billion. This increase in investment comes as a result of the Chips and Science Act signed into law in August this year. Nirav, interesting developments on both fronts. What can you tell us about this?
So, a few things, right? So, first is, remember we had spoken about like the riots in the iPhone city in Zhengzhou. And now Apple is facing a shortage of 6 million iPhone handsets for iPhone 14 and 14 Max Pro. This is kind of like in the holiday season where a lot of people in the US are gifting and like people are buying and upgrading their phones in end of year. This kind of shortage hits Apple directly in the bottom line, right? So that is one thing. All these years we've been having just-in-time production, centralized production, lowest cost, high margins. You have to think about just in case. So I think in any ways it makes sense for Apple to have a resilient supply chain that any shock, could be a natural disaster, could be anything, could be some government policies, should not derail your kind of production plans. While it is expensive to have redundancies, it gives you resilience. So Apple has been saying they want to move a lot of the iPhone production to India and AirPods, MacBooks and Apple Watches to Vietnam, right? But to be realistic, they have 744 component suppliers, 262 are based in China, 71 in Taiwan, and in Vietnam it's 28 and in India it's 11, right? So India you've got Foxconn, Pegatron, Wistron having these assembly plants, etc. But so it's a long way. But now they're taking a step in that direction, right? So I think they are trying to diversify. Second thing is, because of potential tensions between China and Taiwan, for TSMC, again it makes sense not to have all its production in Taiwan. What if there is war? What if whatever happened between Russia and Ukraine happens between China and Taiwan? So it is just prudent for them. I don't know whether there will be war or no, but if you do some sort of scenario analysis, it is prudent for them to diversify away. Second thing is, if you don't, either you manufacture where all your assembly is going to happen. So you manufacture chips in Taiwan, assemble them in China and export them to the rest of the world. What Apple is trying to do is at least like asking TSMC to make all the chips in Arizona, at least for the US domestic consumption. So US has also passed the CHIPS Act and the Science and Technology Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, which has a lot of benefits for direct investment. So TSMC is using that, setting up plants in Arizona. They have like the 4 nanometer chips plant, which will be ready by 2024, and the 3 nanometer chips plant will be ready by 2026, right? Which will already be in production in 2024 in Taiwan itself. But what the Biden administration has done is trying to incentivize them to produce enough chips for the US consumption out of the whole world to be produced locally in Arizona. So this is kind of like reshoring and friendshoring which is happening. And that is a big trend. Since China joined WTO in 2000, you saw all production supply chains move to China. And now slowly they are moving out of China. So again, what it is in it for India, India is trying to get to early 25% of production of iPhones initially global, and then up to 40 to 45% by 2030. These are long timelines, but I think the direction is pretty clear. Apart from once you start getting Apple, which is the world's largest company and the most profitable company, right? Trying and diversifying its production lines, which is also signal to the others. See, Apple has very high profit margin, so it has the money to diversify. For a lot of others, it will lose your competitive advantage versus, say, like a Korean company like Samsung, etc. But like Apple has enough profits. But this is also like a signal to the rest, right? India has done a lot in the semiconductor space, in PLIs. We've spoken a lot about it on Bharatvaarta. US has done something in form of the CHIPS Act. So I think the rest of the world is waking up. I think for the US, which is the largest consumption market, friends like Mexico definitely benefit. Proximity to the US and friendly to the US. So you'll see a bit of friend shoring, you'll see a bit of reshoring. For India, while right now it is like in the French camp of the US, India also can get sanctions the way semiconductor business has been sanctioned in China by Biden industry. So India needs to at least think similarly. At least for its own domestic consumption, try and have enough production that you are resilient for yourself and a little bit more for exports, right? So, and this also allows you to have like a bargaining chip. Wrong use of the word chip, but India also has like leverage, right, in international negotiations. So once you are part of these supply chains, as Apple is realizing it's very, very tough to diversify away from China. This is like an 8-year project, right? But if Apple is doing it slowly over this decade, we will see more and more people try and diversify away a bit, right? So it reduces the leverage that China has on them. And as we've said, you're moving from a just-in-time to just-in-case. You're going from focusing on efficiency towards resilience. All this probably leads to higher inflation and higher costs, but that cost is well worth paying for the safety of stability of your supply chain and resilience to shocks. So this is a good development, especially for India, and hopefully we see a lot more of such things happening.
And something like Apple moving its production facilities here will raise our capabilities as well, big time, right? And prepare us for any other business that might come our way, right? So fantastic stuff on this front. We earlier did an episode with Gaurav Goel and Arun Mampally on the Indian semiconductor scene and, what we need to do in that regard. Both of them are industry veterans. Do check it out. We'll link to it in the description as well. Well, finally, Russia and US swapped prisoners last week. On Thursday, American basketball star Brittany Greiner arrived in the United States Friday morning after being released from a Russian prison. The WNBA star was arrested in Moscow 10 months ago on drug charges for carrying cannabis oil. Greiner was exchanged in Abu Dhabi on Thursday for Viktor Bout, a 55-year-old Russian national who was serving a 25-year sentence in a US prison. Viktor Bout is a convicted arms trafficker known as the Merchant of Death and had been held in an American prison for 12 years. Well, as I'm saying this, I'm smiling slightly because if you have a look at Viktor Bout's Wikipedia page, it reads like a quintessential Bond villain, right? The man has been everywhere. Eastern Europe, Afghanistan, the Middle East, Africa, etc. And he's been in the middle of, selling arms and ammunition to the shadiest characters in the world, right? Although, his wife claims he is innocent. It's crazy. So, Nirav, what can you say about this?
Okay, so couple of things, right? Look at the prisoners' profiles. So, Brittany Greiner is like a very successful WNBA player, but she traveled to Russia on her own personal trip to make some money playing basketball in the off season, where she carried cannabis oil, which, while it might be legal in some states in the US, is clearly illegal in Russia, and was sentenced for 9 years for smuggling drugs into Russia, right? So that, while she claimed it's an honest mistake, etc. So this is her profile, right? While she might be very popular, it is not like a very big crime. Second thing is, it's not as if she can do either much damage to Russia or do like massive positive impact to the US. On the other hand, look at this Viktor Bout guy. He was part of the USSR, Soviet Air Force, and he was when USSR was collapsing. So he's actually of Ukrainian descent, born in Tajikistan, was a part of the intelligence with the Air Force. He was in Africa when this thing was USSR was collapsing, and Russia had like a lot of arms pile in various countries and a lot of planes, which he sold in the black market, and he sold things to the highest bidder. And he was convicted in Thailand in 2008, was extradited to US in 2010, and in 2012 was sentenced to 25 years in prison. He's called Merchant of Death. He's called the Lord of War. I think there are a couple of Hollywood movies which have been made on him. Lord of War is one of them. And the reason that he's been convicted is he was selling arms to the Colombian revolutionaries who were using them against like the US over there in their war for drugs or whatever. So if you look at like these two characters, you see that who's got more leverage here? Like, despite Russia being under sanctions and people say we are moving away from Russia and Russian economy is going to collapse, they are able to get a person who can have like a massive impact across the world. I don't know. He's been out of action for 14 years since 2008. So I don't know what he has. But he is a person who's been a spy, an international agent, arms dealer, and selling to the highest bidder, as you mentioned, in Afghanistan, in the Middle East, in Angola and Mozambique, in Eastern Europe, in like Bosnia, Yugoslavia, right? He's been everywhere where there's been chaos and crimes, right? So he can have a massive negative impact to the world if he's set out free. I don't know. He's 55 years old. I don't know what he'll do now. Probably just rest in retirement. Not just his wife, probably his mother, if she's alive, also thinks he's innocent. But that's what it is. So I think this is either making a mockery or like as Americans say that, like one American citizen is worth more than anyone else in the world, or like this is probably pandering to the voter base and getting a very woke person out. Well, Americans don't care about Viktor Bout, right? He's not actually operated in the US. Like, to be fair, the crime that he's been convicted of is selling arms to some Colombians who used it against American troops, right? We've seen like Narcos. So it's the FARC, the revolutionary guys over there who bought arms from him and used it against American troops, which again you want to say whether that's legal or illegal, or legality of American troops in Colombia is also like very different. So a lot of average American citizen doesn't care about Viktor Bout, right? So he's been let go. And average American citizen probably watches WNBA. I don't know. Brittany Greiner is definitely one of the stars over there, right? So they're aware of that. Is person of minority both on race as well as like in orientation. So part of the LGBT community as well as like being black. So probably that helps as well. But this is what they're telling, that what kind of leverage you have. There are other people. There are US Marines who are in Russian captivity. There are US spies who could have been an equivalent exchange, who you are trying to get back. And this tells you where the administration values who more, or feels that the impact of release of like some unknown spies especially are usually unknown because you don't want to be popular if you're a spy. So some unknown spy, you don't know what the exact impact is, to be brought back doesn't lead to electoral gains, whereas this might, right? So I think that is what it is. And I think this one clearly Russia has shown its leverage over the West over here, and US has shown where their loyalties or policies lie. Second thing is, for an average American spy who's working in a hostile environment in some other country, this tells you that you are lower down in the pecking order than like a athlete who's just gone in and tried to smuggle drugs in, even if for personal consumption in another country. So this could be demotivating for some people as well. But anyways, it's just interesting to see, and I would definitely recommend people to check out profile of both Viktor Bout and Brittany Greiner. Both are very entertaining. It's all up there on Wikipedia and the internet. Yep. And both are like characters. Both are one of a kind.
Absolutely. You mentioned the average American might be interested in WNBA. The stats are that, the WNBA viewership is about 200 to 300,000 right now. And, in contrast, the NBA, I think, is around 10 million plus, right? So it's not something that, WNBA is the mainstream sport or something like, Brittany is a national icon. Well, that brings us to the end of the podcast for this week, end of the weekly. We have a few interesting episodes coming up. We have Valina Chakurova in conversation with Alexander Stahel, and they spoke about energy sanctions and the global energy crisis. Again, very relevant topic. We're going to publish that next week. And then there's one about the ongoing Twitter drama. I spoke to Ashish Chandorkar and Amit Paranjpe. It was a fun conversation. We'll publish that as well. We have another one planned on movies, right? I mean, something that we don't discuss as often on Bharatvaarta. I think we really should. So I'm going to be talking to Kaushal Inamdar, who you've heard earlier as well on the podcast. And is a very famous music producer, director. I'm going to be talking to him about the portrayal of dharma in movies, and also how the South Indian movies have been doing well this year, and so on and so forth. So yeah, fascinating episodes coming up. Do tune in to all of these and share this widely with your family and friends. Until next week, from Neerav, Abhishek and myself, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.